I would like to welcome you to the Technical Advisory Committee meeting for July 25th, 2022. For the regular business, the first item is the approval of the agenda. We do have the one modification in item E. Please note that. Other than that, entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion and second to approve the agenda. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Hearing none, thank you. And now Chad for one other thing. Approval of the minutes from June 27th. If there's any questions, we can pull it off and discuss. If not, entertain a motion to approve as submitted.
Move to approve.
Second.
Have a motion and second to approve the June 27 minutes. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hearing none, thank you. All right, Chad, Director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members of Technical Advisory Committee. Just an overview for today's meeting. We have a few action items, and then we have a couple of discussion items. The action items are mainly the MTP amendment and TIP. Those were presented in the past and public involvement occurred. Staff will be presenting those for your approval. And urban freight corridors were also was presented earlier, and the update will be presented for you today, seeking your approval. And a couple of items on UPWP, the one for the future tasks and activities, and minor revisions for 2022 will be presented as well. And finally, air quality. Nina from City of Wichita will be presenting on air quality, how it's monitored in Wichita. I think at the moment we have our staff presenting bike ped count efforts. So let me request either Ashley or Dora to present.
Good morning, I'm Dora. Just wanted to remind everyone that we're still looking for volunteers for a bike and ped count this year. The dates are September 21st, 22nd, and the 24th. There are various times you can sign up online or come to me after the meeting and I can do it myself or help you. Just a reminder that the data that we collect helps to estimate the number of people who bicycle, walk, and run at these locations. And then the data that we collect, we use it to plan future bike and ped investments. Any questions, please let me know, contact me. Thank you.
Dora, just curious, yes. You've made this announcement several times.
Yes.
How many folks have signed up?
We have 44. I checked this morning, we have 44 so far.
And what's your ideal number?
We try to have at least 2 per location per time, just in case, something goes wrong and somebody can't make it. So ideally around 80 would be a good number.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Dora. The one last thing I would like to keep all posted is WAMPO staff have uploaded on our website the safety request for proposal, RFP. So, by September 2nd, we are expecting to receive some proposals from consulting firms. And staff did a good job putting an effort in coordinating with KDOT on procurement procedures on developing RFP for safety. So staff would like to work with all jurisdictions, county, City of Wichita, Derby, and all jurisdictions to be sure that the consulting firm does a good job analyzing the data on fatalities in the region, and then develop strategies to reduce. And also eventually, the next year's cycle, develop a grant application with this adopted plan. So how we can have a competitive grant application by next September 2023. These are the goals of our safety plan. And then we'll work with you closely as this process develops more. Okay, with that, thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Chad. public comment. If there's anybody like to address the committee, ask you to step up to the mic, or if there's anyone on phone.
So it looks like there are no chats online and we did not get any submitted emails. So as of today and right now, there are no public comments.
Thank you very much. All right, for item A, MTP amendment number 2. Ashley?
How do I go to the next slide? Oh, sorry. Okay, thank you. Actually, before Ashley goes, my name is Kaylin Trabascus. I'm a transportation planning intern with WAMPO. Today, I'll be going through a brief background on the MTP Amendment 2, and why this amendment is necessary. So, Reimagined Move 2040 is the name of WAMPO's Long Range Metropolitan Transportation Plan, or MTP. This plan outlines the region's transportation system vision. All federally funded and or regionally significant transportation projects within the 4-year time span of the TIP are required to be consistent with its plan. And you can see more in the packet as well, pages 10 through 23. Why Amendment 2 was necessary. During the federal fiscal years FFY 2023 to 2026 TIP call for projects, member jurisdictions in the WAMPO area requested to submit projects to the MTP for funding that would not normally be eligible for WAMPO suballocated funding. This was because they were not listed in the MTP or they hadn't been offered enough funding in the MTP funding menu portion of the plan. In response to this, TAC and the TPB agreed to temporarily alter the process for selecting projects for the 2023 MTP, so more of those projects might be considered. This change required an amendment to the original MTP plan. So for a brief overview of the timeline we're talking about here, you can see in this graphic that the amendment development was initiated by the temporary approval of the new selection process. Then WAMPO completed its call for projects. Those projects were approved by the TPB, and the amendment was developed to support this because TIP projects were selected, the MTP did not sufficiently support. Then the amendment was reviewed at a state and federal level. We had a public comment period and a very successful open house, which you'll get some pictures of later. And now we're at the last stage of the process, which is approval through the TAC and TPB bodies. Thank you much. Ashley's going to talk about the character of Amendment 2 now.
Thank you, Kaylin. My name is Ashley Briers, and I'm the Transportation Planning Manager. And this amendment increases the funding menu amounts for existing projects in the MTP, as well as adjusted some of the time bands and the total costs of projects. And this was again due to the federal fiscal year 23 TIP development process. The MTP maintains fiscal constraint, and this shows you the fiscal constraint. The ending balance before this MTP amendment was done was 42 million, and now it's 13.7 million. This table shows the projects before the amendment. So all the yellow highlights show what changed. And you can see that the total cost, the MTP amount, WAMPO funding menu, and the time bands were changed. There are 22 projects on this list that were changed, and includes the Nelson Drive realignment in Derby and the 17th Street from I-135 to Hillside. And those projects will be discussed more in the TIP section of the agenda later. So this shows what it was changed to. So the green highlights show the revised version. The public comment period was June 15th to July 15th. We received one public comment regarding this, and it was at the open house that was on June 29th. And the public comment is listed here about public transport and rail service. We included it in the document and noted that we received the comment. Here are a couple of pictures of the open house. It was at the Advanced Learning Library down the block here. We had about 10 people show up, and we had some good conversations with people about what WAMPO does and what the TIP is and what the MTP is, because we had a joint open house for both documents that were being amended or developed. And then the action options. So either recommend approval as proposed, not recommend approval, recommend approval with specific changes, and our staff recommendation is to recommend as proposed. I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Any questions or discussions? If not, entertain a motion that the board would recommend to the TPP approval of Amendment 2 as proposed.
So. Second.
A motion is second recommending to the TPP approval as proposed. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Hearing none, thank you.
Thank you.
You're still up.
I'm still up. The federal fiscal year 2023 to federal fiscal year 2026 Transportation Improvement Program is next. The TIP is the short range plan of projects that are implementing the MTP's vision. And for this TIP, it is 2023 to 2026. And all regionally significant or federally funded projects need to be in the TIP before they can proceed. And they must be consistent with the MTP, which is why we just did an MTP amendment. This TIP programs about $12 to $14 million a year in WAMPO's suballocated funding. And the 23 to 26 TIP includes 108 individual projects that are worth $1.4 billion. And the project or the TIP must be fiscally constrained. So we don't program more projects than we have funding for. This graphic shows how the MTP and the TIP work together. And so again, the MTP sets the large vision and then the TIP implements the vision. And then as projects or once projects are selected, then they work with KDOT and are eventually constructed and implemented. This shows the TIP development process. We did a call for projects in the spring, and then project selection committee meetings occurred in the spring after staff reviewed projects. And then those projects that were selected were brought before TAC and then TPP for approval. Once those projects were approved, then they were incorporated into the TIP document, which then received federal and state review. And we had our public comment period and the open house. And now we're here today to ask for approval. So we received 33 project submissions in the spring that were worth over $117 million. We did not have enough to fund all of those because we had about 26 million for the years 25 and 26. So we ended up funding 4 projects fully at 80%, 7 projects at up to 80%, and 2 priorities for remaining funding. And I'll show these in the next slides. So this table shows the 4 projects that were funded fully with up to 80%, because these projects are 80% federally funded, 20% locally funded most of the time. And so we were able to fund this fully to the 80% level, these 4. Then these 7 were funded as high as we could with the amount of funding that was left. And I think they're about 77% funded at the moment. But as we receive more funding, we will increase all of these the same. And then these are the 2 priorities after the second table is fully funded. Then we'll have, Bel Air has a right of first refusal. The Bel Air project is a very large project. So if the funding is not sufficient, then it would go to the Redbud Path project. The TIP also talks about our performance measures and how projects are helping us achieve our performance measures. We have safety measures, reliability measures, pavement condition, bridge condition, transit asset management, and transit safety. And this table just shows a number of projects helping with each of those measures. For the fiscal constraint, we anticipate receiving $970 million in this 4-year TIP timeframe. Total anticipated cost is $890 million, which leaves us an $81 million balance. And this shows the projects by the TIP, or by type in the TIP. And as you can see, there's a large majority that are highway and road, and then smaller portions that are bike ped, transit, bridge. And the total here is $522 million. This map shows all of the projects in the TIP. The green ones are modernization projects, orange are bike ped, Red are rail. The slightly other red color is expansion. Teal is rehabilitation. Yellow is technology, and purple is transit. And then this map shows all of those projects with our environmental justice areas, which are places that have been identified because they have higher minority or low income populations. And so we reviewed how our projects would impact those areas. And the fiscally constrained transportation improvements in this TIP are not expected to disproportionately burden these areas. Roughly between 25 and 29% of the MAPL projects are within the EJ areas. We received 2 public comments for the TIP. One was from the city of Andover, needing to make a change to one of their projects in the TIP. And then the other one was that same comment from the MTP that I talked about earlier that we received at the open house. So the action options for the TIP are to recommend approval as proposed, recommend not approving it, recommending approval with specific changes, and our staff recommendation is recommend as proposed. And I'm available for questions.
Any comments or questions?
Did we, I obviously we didn't, but I've got to ask anyway. I thought we already approved the TIP at one time, at least the new projects that came in. Is this?
Yeah. So when was that? May, you approved the new projects. So this is the overall document that the new projects were put in.
Okay, sorry, that makes sense. I mean, I always realize it's more than just the new projects, but that was throwing me off. So thank you.
Yeah.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. And Chad, I apologize for asking this again. Are you able to, at some point in time, if you haven't already, make that for your spreadsheet available for everybody to see? Is there a link to that on the? I only ask because, you know, as you go into the full TIP document itself, you can find any project, and in any year you can kind of, but it's hard. It's almost impossible to compare it, not compare, but to see overall what's in the 4 years. And you know, I think for any of us community wise, and especially like for me to be able to share with elected officials and others, that spreadsheet is so handy to have. Is that something that's still available?
Yeah, sorry, we didn't send you the link where the website is. We'll make sure we put on the website and then send you the link to the website. Gary,
okay, thank
soon.
you.
Thank you.
Anything else, Gary? Any other discussion? If not, I'm recommending that we submit for approval the TIP as proposed to the transportation policy body. Entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
Have a motion and a second to recommend the approval of the TIP to the transportation policy body. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, thank you. We are still up.
I'll be in a couple people.
Thank you, Ashley and Mr. Chairman. My name is Alicia Hunter. I'm a senior transportation planner here at WAMPO, and I'm going to provide a brief background on the CUFC recommendations. So KDOT has asked MPO staff to recommend roads to be designated as critical urban freight corridors. Roads designated as CUFCs will become part of the National Highway Freight Network. And projects on roads that are designated as CUFCs that contribute to efficient freight movement will be eligible for funding under the National Highway Freight Program. KDOT and Kansas MPOs in consultation may designate up to 150 miles of roads for CUFCs within the state. That's 75 miles more than previously allowed. And CUFCs must be on public roads within an MPO's urbanized area boundary. And WAMPO staff have presented draft CUFC recommendations to the TAC in June and TBB in July. And WAMPO staff sent those draft recommendations to each city and county in the region to provide feedback. So now I'll pass it over to Eldon and he will elaborate on the rationale for identifying the recommendations.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Eldon Tassinen. I'm another one of the interns here at WAMPO, and I'm just going to shortly go over the rationalization and the reasoning behind some of our selections for our CFC recommendations. So initially, when we were given this task by KDOT, these are the definitions that they gave us for determining what qualifies to be a CFC. It has to be a corridor that connects a intermodal freight facility, such as our airports or our rail terminals. Obviously, we don't have very many seaports here in Kansas. And it has to connect them to the primary highway freight system, which are going to be I-35 and I-135 in the WAMPO region, or to any of the rest of the interstate system. Other qualifiers can be a corridor of a route of the primary highway freight system that serves as an important alternate to existing routes, or a route that serves a major freight generator, logistics center, or manufacturing/warehouse facility. And of course, the last one is a little bit of a catch-all. It's just anything that is otherwise deemed important to the movement of freight within our region. So when we initially generated our recommendations for our CFCs, what we were primarily looking for were those intermodal freight facilities, as well as the freight generators and logistics centers. So these would have included things like the Dillon's Distribution Center, the Coleman facility, as well as our airports and rail terminals. So then the next thing that we decided to do when determining what should qualify for a CFC is we decided to take a look at the KDOT provided data of the truck annual average daily traffic, or the AADT. So you can see here we have a map that designates, just takes all of the roads in our urbanized area, and it calculates how many trucks travel on them during the average day. So you can see the darker blue things get, the more trucks we see on those routes. So we tried to prioritize those when it came to defining them as CFCs. You can also see on our map here that there are some routes that are already highlighted in red, and those are the ones that are already qualified to be CFCs from previous years. Then we decided to take this a little bit further, and we calculated the total truck share of the total AADT. So we wanted to not only figure out where there were a lot of trucks, but also where the majority of the traffic was trucks that were carrying freight. Because in more industrial locations, we're going to see more trucks as opposed to in more urban or civilian locations. So when we look at this map, we can see that there are definitely some sectors of our urbanized area that see a lot more truck traffic. And so once again, we tried to prioritize those when defining where our CFCs would go. So you can see here, we have a list of our already existing CFCs. So these include things like the Eisenhower Airport Connector, as well as North Broadway and Hydraulic Avenue, which connect to the Coleman facility, as well as a significant portion of Kellogg, as well as a few others. So then we took this and we decided to start adding to it. And we did that by, of course, taking recommendations from our individual jurisdictions that we got after our last TAC meeting, as well as comparing that alongside to our calculated truck AADT and truck density, as well as, using where we know our intermodal facilities and high traffic facilities to be to generate a tiered list for our final recommendations to KDOT. And Ashley will be presenting that list to you guys. So I'll pass it off to her.
Thank you, Alicia and Eldon. Alrighty, so this is our first tier of recommended corridors for CUFCs. And there are 8 projects on here, and they are not in any sort of priority order. They're just all lumped together in this tier 1. And CUFCs need to be on existing roads, and so that's just something of note. So this list includes US 54, 400, 2 different ones, K254, K96, MacArthur Road, K15, K42, and West Street. Then this is the second tier, and there are 9 projects in this one. And again, they're not in any sort of priority order. They're just here together. So there's K96, Pawnee Street, 77th Street North, North Broadway, 45th Street, North Broadway, K42, 13th Street, and 53rd. And then tier 3, where there's 8 projects in this one. So K53, K42, K15, 53rd, 119, Webb, Grand, and 95th. So this map shows all of those. The red lines show the existing CUFCs, and then the blue ones are tier 1. The purple ones are tier 2, and the orange ones are tier 3. The green lines show the primary highway freight system that already exists. And let's see. Okay, this is in your packet. I don't have the page number listed though. 42, page 42, I believe. So the action options are to recommend that TPP recommends these to KDOT as proposed, or not recommend them, or recommend them with specific changes. And staff recommends proposing that they recommend them as proposed. Any questions?
Bert, I have a quick question. So this might have been explained, but I apologize for being slow today. What's the, in its simplest form, what's the advantage and or disadvantage of a corridor being within this group?
Yeah, once you're part of this designation, then you're eligible for funding for projects that help with freight movement.
I kind of thought so, but I want to make sure that makes sense to me. Thank you.
You answered one question, that any road that we're recommending must be an existing road to the level of which can handle the flow of transportation, or it's just a county road that could be expanded later? What's the definition there?
I don't believe there was a specific definition on the type of road. However, it had to be within the urbanized area. So that kind of makes some road classifications. So the urbanized area here are the ones that are with the diagonal hatch. So that's why the roads just kind of stop, why the colors just kind of stop.
And as it continues to expand, what's the process for expanding that area?
The urbanized area boundary?
Yes.
That has to do with the census. And so at some point, hopefully we'll get the 2020 census data for our urbanized area boundary, and then we will review that and decide if I believe we can expand it if we would like.
Any other comments or discussion? Okay, the recommendation that I would support is that the transportation, or the TAC approve the recommendations as proposed to, let's see, does it go to KDOT, or who's this? The recommendations to KDOT as proposed.
I'm sorry, is it going to KDOT or is it going to the full posse body?
The recommendation is recommend a TPP approve the CUFC recommendations to KDOT as proposed.
Okay, so moved. Second.
I have a motion, a second, to send forward the recommendations to the TPP approve the CUFC recommendations to KDOT as proposed. All in favor, say aye. Anyone opposed? Same sign? No, thank you.
Can I just clarify that? That seems strange to me that doesn't go to the TPB.
It'll go to TPB first, and then they'll send it to KDOT.
Is that motion clear then?
I believe so.
It's as you put in your recommendation.
Thank you.
All right, next item, discussion of the UPWP 101 and 2023 task.
Yes, thank you. So before we get going into the Unified Planning Work Program or UPWP too much, we thought we should do a little bit of a 101 as to what the UPWP is. And so it is the Unified Planning Work Program, and it identifies what we're going to work on and make sure we address planning requirements and projects that we'll work on with federal funds and include all the fundings that we'll use. And it is developed annually, and Federal Highway and FTA approves it with KDOT providing oversight. The components of the UPWP are all of the planning work tasks, again, and the resulting products that will develop from our work tasks, as well as who will do what, the responsible organizations, and the timeframes, and then the costs. And so that's the major thing of the UPWP is it's our budget for the next year. And it describes what we'll work on with the funding. And it also includes our funding sources. So there are 5 core items that we need to do as an MPO. And the first one listed here is the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, or the MTP, which we just amended. The original MTP, Reimagine Move 2040, was approved in June of 2020. Move that up so you can see it. Oh, and the next plan is due by June of 2025. So staff has begun updating the appendices for this plan, and the safety action plan that we released the RFP for on Friday, and then the regional active transportation plan that we will be working on will be incorporated into the MTP. The TIP is another core document, and we're hoping that will be approved in August. And then the UPWP, the public participation plan, is required to say how we are going to do our planning processes. And it was last completed in 2017. Staff is working on that now and will be done before the end of 2022. And then the congestion management process is part of the travel demand model. And that RFP closed on Friday. So we'll be selecting that somewhat soon, and we'll be concluding that process by April of 2024. So those are our big items that we have to keep in mind as we develop our work program for the next year. And so keeping that in mind, here's our list of tasks that we're looking at doing next year. So the first couple are things we're working on this year: the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan, the Travel Demand Model, Congestion Management Program Update, the Economic Development Study. Then the Regional Active Transportation Plan is in coordination with the Wichita Bike Master Plan, and that should be getting going sometime in the next few months. And then we will be coordinating with the Bike Master Plan and then get our plan going as well later. The Greater Wichita Bike Map was last printed in 2016. And so we were thinking that that would be a good thing to work on as an output of the Regional Active Transportation Plan. It cannot be printed with federal funding though, so we'll have to find sponsorships when we're at that point. Then the Intelligent Transportation Systems Architecture was last updated in 2006. And we had a presentation about ITS last meeting. And so we just need to kind of review that. The Safe Routes to School Planning and the MTP 2050 Planning Assistance Projects are both projects that were just approved in the 23 TIP. And so those both have federal fiscal year 24 funding. So that means they won't be active until October of 23. So that will be later in the year type things. Then we have continuing to update the MTP to the 2050. And our annual bike ped counts, we're looking at seeing how to make those more robust and how to get more data. Then we have the Coordinated Public Transit Human Services Transportation Plan, which was last updated in 2018. So it's time to do that. Then the Wichita Transit Network System Redesign Plan that Wichita Transit's working on. So we're just going to help with that. And that's federal fiscal year 23 funding. So that'll be coming up fairly soon. Then we're looking at doing a transit study, potentially a fiscally constrained implementation plan of the 2018 Connecting Communities plan, and working together with the mobility management conversations that have been going on. And then maybe an electric vehicle network plan, so we can prepare for funding opportunities from the bill. And then of course, administration of the new TIP. So the question for you all are there other tasks we should consider as we develop this new UPWP for next year.
Can I ask two questions about, just for clarification on my part, the Greater Wichita Bike Map, I assume that identifies all existing bike facilities across the region?
Yep.
And does it identify what type of facility it is?
I believe it has some sort of categories. I don't remember what exactly.
I was just curious if it would designate on-street versus shared use or anything like that.
Well, and that's the type of thing we could have conversations as we develop it and decide if we want to evolve it. So it's more on-street or off-street or that kind of thing.
Okay. You know, we, that would be really nice to have. I don't think I even knew there was, I mean, we've seen maps, but to have something that's comprehensive and up to date would be really nice. On the Safe Routes to School Planning Assistance, would you remind me what the goal is with that? Is there a specific, you know, it used to be Safe Routes to Schools was all of us could apply for it. And then I think it was kind of decided that larger MPO areas weren't eligible for it. And we had to basically set aside our own funding for that. Is that about still the same?
Yes. So when we receive our TA funding that we can distribute, some of it is designated as Safe Routes to School funding. And so our thought was we could do this planning process and then identify Safe Routes to School projects that then could be selected for Safe Routes to School funding, WAMPO suballocated Safe Routes to School funding in future TIP development cycles.
But that, and I'm just asking so I understand, I think that funding that you say, the portion of the TA funding that comes to us designated Safe Routes to Schools, there's no mandate that says WAMPO has to use that for Safe Routes to Schools. So it would take deliberate action by all of us if we actually still wanted to use that as Safe Routes to Schools. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
I only ask because we get that question a lot from the public about Safe Routes to Schools funding, what's available, what's out there. And so I think that's important designation. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ashley, and thank you, Gary, for the question. I just want to share one more thing. You can see the tasks developed by staff in conjunction with discussions with the DOT, Federal Highway Administration, and Federal Transit Administration, and all the jurisdictions now. Also wanted to share, as we develop the next UPWP, we anticipate tasks like travel demand forecasting, for example, demographic and socioeconomic forecasting, and also transportation performance measures. So some of these tasks involve transportation engineering staff background. So we anticipate to hire some transportation engineering and data staff in the future. That way, there are many parts in these studies. For example, economic development study, what are the trends that can be developed for the region to monitor the growth in the economic development? So how do we measure these trends? What are the indicators? Things like this. And for example, in active transportation plan, there is this demand estimation. So many areas of this need some data, and some other activities need engineering background. For example, developing cross sections for active transportation plan and the cost estimates for bike routes is one example where transportation engineering background is needed. So just want to keep you in the loop that in the future, we are anticipating to expand staff with transportation engineering and data background to address all these tasks that we are developing. Thank you.
This has already been asked, but once all these different plans are developed and created, what is the master link that one talks to the other?
Yeah, so the MTP. So as we're developing it, we need to be aware of all of the plans that we're doing to make sure they don't conflict. But then they all feed into the MTP, which is the overarching vision for the future.
That's a great question, Mayor. Since the MTP involves all modes of transportation, it involves all modes of users, a comprehensive list of how this infrastructure and the demand that users are, they're all documented in the MTP. And these all components, they fall into the long-range transportation plan. And thank you, Ashley.
Any other discussion on that?
I have just one comment to make on the potential projects. Gary and I and a few other City of Wichita staff have talked about EV planning, specifically through BIL funding. So that might be something we want to coordinate our efforts on.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is E, 2022 UPWP Amendment 1.
Right. Thank you, Mayor. Staff have put together the amendment for UPWP 2022. This is the current UPWP. Ashley had just presented the next year 2023 UPWP. Let me see if, well, I'll refer to the handouts in the packets for easier reference. On page 48 of your handout has the summary of what changes occurred. And the before and after. Primarily the overall budget is still the same. So let me also refer to the last pages of the report. After the page 48, there's a report. And at the end of the report, I think the page of the report itself is 25 and 26. For example, there's a table on pages 25 and 26 that has a revised version and original version. These two pages are like 3 pages from the end. Like if we count backwards from the end, these are 2 tables that have, you can see the section 1.1 has a total budget of 514,250. If you're unable to see it, I can help find the page. There are sections, subtask 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and so on to 6.4 on that page. Like it's page 25 of the report itself. You can see there are 2 tables, like page 25 and 26. And then on both of them, 1.1 subtask has a total of 514,250. And then also the same in the revised one as well. Now, what's changing is the distribution within that subtask. For example, there's operating expenses and there is salaries and benefits, staff work. So if you look at those, that is the revision that was made. There was some budget transfer from salaries and benefits to operating expenses. You can see initially it was 241,000 and 273,250. Now it is changed to 295,000, and then the operating expenses is now, those are the 2 changes. So the increase in the operating expenses, why was there an increase in the operating expenses? That's what I'm going to talk to you a little bit, referring to the page 48 in your packet. That's the red numbered page numbers that were given in your packets. So you can see on that page, there is an operating expenses budget before and after and the difference. Let me request your attention to the total number there. Before it was 46,000, and then now the revised is 100,000. The difference is 54,000. That's the one we just saw on the page with 1.1 subtask. So these changes occur over a period of year. We monitor how our expenses are occurring, and then we make these revisions. These are common for UPWP to have these revisions made to reflect what is happening. For example, we had a cubicles design to accommodate the future growth of traffic, and that office supplies and equipment has added an additional 30,000 that made the total 40,000 there. So that's one example. And similarly, employee training, professional development, and those revisions were also made. So just to clarify what changes were made before and after, And overall, there's no change in the budget. It's just moving from one subtask to the other. So with that, we are seeking your approval today to recommend approval of the amendments to the adopted 2022 UPWP as or not recommend or recommend with specific changes. Thank you, Mayor.
Any discussion, questions, clarification? Seeing none. Call for motion to recommend approval of the amendments of the adopted 2022 Unified Planning Work Program.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion, a second to recommend approval. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the air quality. Nina?
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Nina Rasmussen, Environmental Quality Specialist with the City of Wichita. And I do apologize. I recently had oral surgery, so apologies in advance if I'm not articulating as well as I could. So I'll give you an update about where we're currently standing as far as air quality, but I'll give you a little bit of a background so you understand the program and how we monitor our air so that the update makes sense. So the City of Wichita administers an air quality program, and this is funded through a yearly grant from the EPA that is passed through KDHE. So we work very closely with these two organizations, and we've been doing this since 2012, I believe. We provide education, outreach, and emissions mitigation strategies throughout the Wichita MSA. So this program essentially offers resources to 4 different counties, those being Sedgwick, Sumner, Butler, and Harvey counties. And so we operate with 3 monitors in the area. These are managed by KDHE. They do all the monitoring and then provide that data to us on a weekly basis. And they look at ozone, PM 2.5 and PM 10, which is just different sizes of particulate matter. And currently the Wichita area is considered to be in attainment of national ambient air quality standards. That means that we maintain a level below 70 parts per billion. And we specifically look at ozone. Some communities look at particulate matter as well, but we just look at ozone, and that's what we are sort of beholden to with our standards. So you can see here, these are all the different monitoring sites in Kansas. These 3 in the South Central region are the ones that we look at. That's Sedgwick, which is northwest of us, the health department, and then Peck, which is south of us towards Sumner. And all 3 of those are essentially what give us our data for what our air quality is looking like now. So just to give you a brief background on ozone, we're looking at ground level ozone. We're not looking at stratospheric ozone layer. This is essentially in the air that we breathe, and ozone forms through, a combination of oxygen, nitrogen oxides, which is largely formed through emissions of vehicles and manufacturing, and then volatile organic compounds such as paints, solvents, but also can be put off from plants. That combined with sun, high heat, that gives us that ozone that we see down at the ground level, which we don't like to see high concentrations of. And that's because it has adverse health impacts. It can cause coughing, throat irritation, decreased lung function, and it can be more deeply felt by those who have asthma and other respiratory conditions. This can lead to increased hospital admissions. So we, for the sake of public health, want to keep our ozone levels low. Also, as I mentioned down here, children and the elderly are also at higher risk of experiencing the impacts of ozone. So in order to assess our ozone levels, we have these 3 monitors that give us readings, but what we are assessed on by the EPA is sort of a long process. So we get this hourly data of ozone, and that records the highest concentration recorded per hour. That is then looked at over an 8-hour span, and we are given, we're recording the highest of that 8-hour span. That gives us our max daily 8-hour average. From there, we take that and we look at the 4th highest concentration and record that for the year. From then, we look at a 3-year rolling average, and that is what the EPA assesses to see if we are maintaining standards. So if, for instance, this year isn't looking that great, that can be okay, depending on the previous 2 years that roll into that 3-year rolling average. And that is also known as the design value. That is what we are assessed on. So there's as you can see here, there's a bunch of different ways in which we sort of have leeway in how we are assessed in how we're maintaining standards. So for instance, you know, one ping on the chart during a single day, during a single hour isn't necessarily going to make or break things. It's really drawn out and averaged so that we have a better understanding of overall ozone levels. And so to give you an idea of trends, I know this chart on the right looks a little scary, but we've had several you know, exceedance days in the past, or days in which we hit higher than 70 parts per billion or 0.07 parts per million, same thing. But that's because we're looking at, you know, the current standard of 70. It used to be higher. So that's why there was a little more, you know, there's several more occurrences of exceedances. Now we haven't been out of attainment since the 1970s. So none of these high levels have resulted in losing attainment status. However, in recent years, we've seen, you know, a decline in our 4th highs, which contribute to our 3-year rolling average, which is generally what we want to be seeing. However, this year has been really volatile. It's been a crazy few weeks, and we've been seeing several exceedances. And so we're sort of seeing this tick back up, which is not exactly what we want to be seeing, because that impacts our 3-year rolling average. And if this continues, then, you know, 3 years down the line, or even sooner, if it's really bad levels of exceedance, we could see ourselves losing attainment. And that comes with various regulations, a state implementation plan, very costly things that nobody wants to see here. So that's just to give you an idea of the 4th high. Here's how that wraps into our 3-year rolling average and the trend. We've sort of plateaued, but again, those levels seem to be creeping up just a little bit. So we could see that start to increase in the next couple of years. And so right now, to give you an idea, the current standard is set at 70. Our current 3-year rolling average as of last week is 64. So that's good. There's still quite a bit of room there. But again, we want to keep that low. And right now, this is not finalized. We are currently in the midst of ozone season, and that continues through October. So we won't know the final number until we finish out this season. And to give you an idea of source categories, the reason why it's important here is a lot of the emissions that we see comes from on-road emissions, 43% estimated in this 2017 report. This is all based off of national inventory emissions data that's provided by the EPA. And I don't believe they have anything more updated than 2017. But yeah, as you can see, on road is quite a big portion of that. And so that's why it's so important to, provide improvements that improve our air quality as well. So what we do to try and bring these numbers down, we work with different businesses and organizations to develop ozone action plans. And that's essentially these commitments to take a look at actions and see where emissions can be reduced. This is also my shameless plug. If anybody is interested, please contact me. It's really easy to get set up. Another thing that could be, quite problemsome in the future is that there have been a lot of conversations about revising the NACs, that's the air quality standards, that would bring it down to a lower threshold. So it's 70 now. We may be seeing something like 65 in the future. And so our 64 that we're sitting at right now wouldn't be as, cushy. So definitely something to keep in mind as we move forward with projects and trying to improve air quality. And with that in mind, this will also require a more collaborative effort to maintain our attainment status. Again, we don't want those regulations that, vehicle test, very expensive vehicle emissions testing, things like that, that would probably be imposed. So we will be working on forging those relationships with manufacturers, other businesses, to really try and bolster that work here being done locally. And that's all I have. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. My email address is there. We also have a website for our air quality program, which is beairawareks.org. And I do plan on updating that with some resource pages. That way we can provide educational materials and anything else that might be beneficial to have for anyone trying to do their own air quality program or just looking for anything additional.
Any comments, questions? Go ahead, Jim.
Back to the source categories, is that specific to Sedgwick County or is that more generalized? And then this is 2017. Is there some kind of a trend line for that as well? Or
I do not have a trend line. That's probably something I can pull and send out to the group as far as how that's changed. They usually do it in 3-year increments, the national emissions inventory data. So I believe the last one was 2014. So I can definitely pull that and we can look at the change. I believe this is specifically for Sedgwick County. And this does look at nitrogen oxides and VOCs. This isn't pulling in the full sort of spectrum of greenhouse gases, just to make you aware of that.
I'm just curious because, we've been talking about this for a long time, but that's interesting to me to know if different segments of this are changing, whatever direction they might go. So
yeah, I can definitely pull that and send it out to the group or send it to WAMPO staff and have them do that.
Nina, is the ozone action plans that you spoke of by industry, are those voluntary or
Yes.
are those required based on industry?
Those are completely optional and they're basically sort of a pick and choose of what you would like to do. A lot of people opt to implement idle reduction policies, have their staff refrain from, using drive-throughs when going in person is, not any less inconvenient. But basically, it does need to be revamped a little bit to include some higher stakes sort of options in there. And that's what we're working on in the next coming year or so.
Thank you, Nina. And Mayor, I have a quick comment also that I want to share on the same note, Nina, you mentioned. When I was a staff at Columbus, Ohio MPO, I was working with Ohio EPA and US EPA in making sure the region is in attainment status. And then just want to share that EPA at times designates a region for attainment or non-attainment or maintenance, in which case certain funding for transportation and MPOs would change. Like, like CMAQ funds, for example, we have the freedom to use it for certain projects like STP funds and other projects. So what happens is when we work with Nina and City of Wichita closely to monitor these stations, because if at all it goes to the levels where the EPA designates a region for non-attainment, then that impacts the way we fund our transportation projects. But at the moment, Wichita is a great place. The air is clean, and it is the attainment status is great. But the problem occurs to larger cities like Chicago and Columbus areas and all. So just want to share what does it mean for MPO? Thank you, Nina.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you very much. I think I saw Jack on the phone. Jack, safety, health, or actually transportation update.
Okay, I had one last comment on the air, just briefly. I think the EPA revises or looks at revising their air quality standards every 5 years. I was just wondering if Nina had some information on if that's still a policy at the EPA of this 5-year review of air quality standards.
I know it's gone back and forth, especially with change in administration, but right. To my understanding, NACS is looking to be revised for 2023, barring any other holds on that.
Okay, thank you.
This is Allison Smith with KDOT Planning, and yes, all the NACs for all the criteria pollutants are reviewed every 5 years. So.
Thank you. Anything else, Jack, for an update from you?
Oh, the Safety and Health Committee does meet next Wednesday, August 3rd, 9:30. I've worked with staff and we developed a draft agenda, which will probably go out soon, looking at items on the agenda, county health data that looks at factors that biking and walking can make improvements to. Hope to have the city staff discuss the plans on the Broadway safety corridor. And in addition to that, we'll be looking at KDOT's highway safety plan and the WAMPO safety plan to provide some input from the committee on those items. Other than that, invite anyone that's interested in participating in the Safety and Health Committee to do so, and it'll be in person and online.
Okay, thank you. Alan, I see you're online as well. Is there anything from the Transportation Committee?
Really just note that our next meeting is September 7th, first Wednesday at 9:30. We are developing the agenda for that, so we don't have anything to entice you with at this point, but looking forward to that meeting. Thank you.
Mr. Chair and members, I just want to share with you that our liaison for MPO liaison at KDOT is now Allison Smith. You all know you worked with Renee Hart and Christy Wilson before, and I'm glad Allison spoke a little bit this today. That helps us to recognize Allison, and thank you, Allison, for working with staff. It's been great coordinating with Allison and in terms of many things like procurement, budget, and various things. Thanks so much and welcome.
Sure, thank you. And I am very familiar with the Wichita region. My family is all in Wichita and Derby, so I am well acquainted with the area. So it's good to meet everybody and work with WAMPO staff.
Thank you very much. Any other business to be discussed?
Oh, one quick thing. Those committees are all online. We don't have a in-person option.
Okay, just a couple things. Just as a reminder, the August meeting is canceled, if everybody remembers, so won't get to see you again until September. Also, just as for staff, the recommendation was made by Gary. Just want to make sure that we capture putting that full 4-year project online and create a link to that. So we can do that. Other than that, if there's no other business, we can call for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Never is. Thank you. Have a good day.